Hey, I'm Rainey Romero with the lovely law firm, and you are watching the Carolina Justice Report. Today we're chatting all about injuries at amusement parks. So I'm here with attorneys Justin Lovely and Sarah Austin. We're chatting all about injuries at amusement parks. This is a big thing here, right?
It's huge because, obviously we're a vacation destination and we have a lot of these amusement parks. And we're not thinking about Disney World or Universal Studios like Orlando. We have rides, trampoline parks, water parks, Go-Kart parks, even putt courses, things like that. That's along the coast here.
Do you see a lot of these come through?
Yeah, we definitely get a handful every season, and that's why we want to make this content to can we educate vacationers and locals alike on the front end so they know what to look out for and what to do if you or a loved one or your kids, because that's usually the kind of cases we get hurt on one of these rides.
Right. So let's talk about trampolines first. Trampolines have always freaked me out to begin with. My kids will never be on them because they're just scary. But, what kind of happens with trampolines? What do you see that comes in for injuries for that?
So trampoline parks are sweeping the nation. They're very fun. You can take your kids there. You walk in, everybody signs in on a little computer. You go and pay your entry fee. There's birthday parties going on.
Sure.
It looks great. Chaos going everywhere, right? And for parents, you're having a great place to have your birthday party, you think, and you can go have a Coke, watch a game, or whatever, while your kids go and jump. And they're jumping on these crazy trampolines. There's a basketball trampoline, a dodgeball trampoline. You're jumping on the
I feel
wall.
like you've had a lot of experience at these trampoline parks.
Well, I have, both with my kids, but also with injuries that we're seeing in these cases that we have. And I can tell you this, I do not want my kids going anymore after I kind of tell you what's going on to look out for. But, so that's been sweeping across the nation. We've got two large ones here. I think there's two or three in the Charleston area where we work. So they're here to stay, and they're making a lot of money. Okay, because it's all the craze now. You don't take your kids to the arcade anymore. They're playing games. And so parents want to get them out of the house, get them off the electronics, and what's one way to release some energy? Send them to the trampoline park for a couple hours. Okay? So the problem that we're seeing is kids are bouncing. You could get the dreaded double bounce, okay? And that's where they're bouncing and some other kid that might be heavier than them hits it, and the momentum it's the force of their legs, and it will cause a compression fracture on their back or their legs. Okay, you've got obviously just a slip and fall where they fall and hit their head on something. So we're seeing those. So a lot of ankles, hands, head injuries. That's what's happening at these locations.
Is it just the trampoline parks, or are you seeing like residential trampoline injuries as well?
Yeah, well, historically that's always been an issue.
Right.
Some people will know, hey, you get a trampoline, and then all of a sudden your homeowner's insurance won't renew your rate, or it's something exponential once they understand you have that. But that danger does lie there. But what we're talking about today is strictly the amusement side of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, when they go there, they do sign this waiver. So does that kind of hold them to not be able to do anything?
Yeah, so that scares a lot of people. And I want everybody to understand, just because there's a waiver, we can beat a waiver. Okay? These waivers are trying to get you to sign off on it, or your kid might not even be with you. They might be with some friend who's an adult, maybe a birthday party they've been dropped off with, and they're the ones signing these waivers for these people.
Gotcha.
We could still prove gross negligence or some other kind of design defect to get around that waiver issue. But that does scare, and that's the reason. They want to kind of scare you, and they know that it's dangerous.
Right.
But if you read that, you're like, oh my God, even though my child was hurt, well, I signed a waiver. There's no case here. That's not true. We need to look at it and see if it's something that we can beat, which we can often do.
And that's not just with trampoline parks, that's with any amusement ride or park. Go-karts, I know they have waivers.
Any kind of physical thing, I feel like there's always those waivers.
Yeah, and I think that when you're signing that waiver, if you even read it, which most people don't, it just says real scary, you can't sue us for anything.
Yeah.
You're expecting that the park or the go-kart or the ride is going to be operating perfectly, like they're doing everything right to protect you. And that's usually not the case, especially.
Well, how does staffing issues affect this?
Yeah, so what we found on the cases that we've worked is these people are either very understaffed, or if they are staffed, it's like little teenage kids with their first high school job.
Right.
What are they doing? They're not paying attention, right?
Sure.
They're working a cash register and then just sitting there bored until their shift's over. And then there needs to be certain ratios. I mean, if you got a couple kids and then a couple employees watching a couple kids, okay, maybe you're fine. But if you've got a couple kids who are teenagers and kids themselves trying to watch 1,000 kids jumping at one time on a busy Friday or Saturday, it's impossible. It can't be done.
Ooh, gives me anxiety thinking about it.
It's having enough staff, but then it's also training your staff properly, which, I mean, you've got teenagers training teenagers. A lot of the cases we have, it's not even what leads up to the injury, but it's how they respond after the injury. They don't really train them on emergency protocol, when to call an ambulance. They don't have, you know, people on site who can treat injuries like that, or even like first aid kits sometimes.
Yeah.
So all that goes into play.
Or you'll have teenage kids or bigger kids bouncing with a little 3-year-old kid, and that's where the problem lies. Or they're playing dodgeball and slamming little kids because nobody's taking care of these people.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of environment that these places create, and then obviously injuries happen, and then subsequently lawsuits have to happen.
Sure. And then, you know, I know we've talked about kind of getting experts involved in this. How would that play in?
Yeah, so more so than any other amusement park case that we handle, you definitely need an expert, because a lot of these things, one, you have to have somebody testify as to this the staffing issue, the design of the park. Sometimes these are laid out really tight, so they're really cramming kids in real tight, and that's an issue when you have a lot of people bouncing. So obviously we need an expert opinion that'll be able to allow us to prove your case if we have to try the case.
Right. Okay, well, let's move on to go-karts, because it's kind of, you know, we were chatting about that a little bit with staffing issues, could be the same kind of thing. You know, what about like the harnessing and that being an improper harness?
Yeah, so again, sometimes we have little kids. They're not, if you have a staffing issue, they're not watching these kids. You know, everybody wants to think they're taller and sit up high, you know, to ride the big go-karts. And if you're not trained and the staff's not trained, they're going to let these little kids go, and they probably cannot control that. Okay, and if they're not big enough to ride it, they're not big enough to be supported by the harness, even if they think it looks like it's latched.
Yeah.
So we've had cases where this has happened, and little kids are zipping around the thing. Of course, what happens? They lose control, or somebody bumps them off, and they're not strong enough to hold the wheel, or can't even reach the brake anyway. And head injuries can happen.
Reaching the pedals is a lot, because we've had accidents, just like go-kart accidents, like car accidents, where it's a kid that's too small. They can't stop in time because they can't reach those pedals.
Yeah.
Well, so what is the injury? Does the go-kart like flip, or they just get like a whiplash kind of thing?
It's severe whiplash. They could hit their head on the little steering wheel. Whiplash. It could even be a brain injury, a closed head injury.
Wow.
We've had a couple cases where they get their teeth knocked out. So it happens, and everybody just needs to be aware of it, and just watch your kids like a hawk, and just be prepared when you're out and about.
Right. All right. And then water parks. That's kind of a whole different ball game. You know, with lifeguard supervision. I mean, more so than even the others. I feel like water parks, those staff really need to be trained well.
Absolutely. And same issue with staffing, but you need lifeguards, right? Because now we're messing with water, we're adding water into the mix.
Right.
Little kids and huge people, you can easily lose track of your child when they're running around all these different slides. So the worst cases that we could see, obviously, is a drowning case. We never want to see that. And that is specifically because they're not staffed, or there's too many people there. They're not keeping the correct ratios. Too many people relative to the staff they have on site.
Well, and we all know how crazy busy it gets in the summer, especially I used to lifeguard at water parks locally, and it's very scary. It's very scary because it's very easy to miss somebody like underneath somebody else. So there's so many people. So
yeah, because you'll miss them, or there's just so many. You get like hypnotized on this. You're just letting them go down. You let them go down. You let them go down, and when you're sitting in the hot sun as a lifeguard, you're a teenage lifeguard or a young college kid lifeguard. I mean, that wears on you, right? So if you're 4 hours into your shift, that's when you're getting drowsy. You're just getting distracted, and then something bad can happen.
If somebody gets hurt, is that like a claim against the lifeguard, or is that a claim against the company?
Yeah, it'll be against the company. The good news is all these amusement providers in South Carolina by law have to have insurance. Okay, they have to have at least $500,000, and many of them have multiple millions of insurance.
Gotcha.
So there's insurance coverage there.
Yeah.
So that's the one good news. Unlike like a car wreck where we could get stuck with a minimum policy, we're dealing with big policies.
Gotcha. Well, and then of course when you add in water too, I'm sure there's a ton of slip and fall cases for that.
Yeah, we don't really see too much of those. Those are kind of a little harder to prove, but we would see the drowning cases. We've had cases before where similar to the go-karts, they're letting smaller kids on bigger rides, and they're getting knocked around in the tube, and then they're getting broken wrists. We've seen head injuries, bruising, and then we've also seen there's some of these rides around here where you have to grab a mat. You take a mat up, and everybody sits on the mat, and then you take off on the mat, and they're not watching where they're putting the mats back. Because everybody's having fun. They get done with the ride. They throw their mat over here. They throw their mat over here. And then the employee, instead of properly putting, maybe this slide mat needs to go with this ride, they mix it up. And then when some little kid takes it, it's the wrong mat for the wrong slide. It's a faulty design that way.
Gracious.
Injury results.
So when we talk about amusement parks, you know, you've said that they have some protection in the law. So each ride has to be inspected. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so all these rides have to be inspected, and that's to kind of protect the public. Obviously, we don't want like a carnival to come into town who's, you know, fly by night with no inspections, and they have elephant rides and all that kind of those fly by night circus.
Those
deals.
things get inspected?
Well, they don't get inspected.
Oh, they don't. I was going to say.
Yeah, that's why we need to make sure they're inspected,
Yeah.
right? So this is what it's meant to prohibit.
Okay.
So so they have to get everything inspected. So, you know, if we take a case in, we're going to make sure that we get those inspections, and we'll send a FOIA request to get that. And then also, you know, the law protects them. It's a huge industry here on the coast, obviously. So the laws are there to protect them. But, you know, that's just defenses that could be used, but we can usually still overcome that. There's always some kind of carve out for negligence that we use to be able to bring a claim and get to that insurance policy for the client.
Yeah. And the good part is, I mean, you guys get in there and do the dirty work. You investigate everything to make sure that they are getting the maximum amount that they can.
Yeah, that's our goal from day one.
Yeah.
There's a big, you know, we got our investigator to go out there, make sure they're in the law also. It gives them defenses, but also make sure they have certain signage requirements so that it's broken out there. Because what we're trying to get to is any kind of negligence per se cause of action that will really nail down the negligence, then we're just arguing over damages. So we look into everything and see, you know, what stone needs to be overturned, what T to cross, what I to dot.
Yeah.
You know, to ultimately work the case out.
Well, I think the big takeaways for me is kind of course, be careful, right? We don't want anybody getting injured, but if something does happen, of course, see a lawyer. And also those waivers that you sign, they don't hold you hostage. You know, you can get around those, but of course you want to have a consultation, and those are free, right?
Absolutely free. We'll sit down and talk to you. We do it every day. Just reach out, talk to Sarah, talk to myself, anybody on my intake team. We're always here for you.
Awesome. Thank you both for chatting about this. Some good information there. Of course, you can visit us online, justiceslovely.com. Give us a call if you have any questions. And of course, you can find us on all of your social media channels, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're everywhere that you consume your media. So thank you so much for watching the Carolina Justice Report today. We'll see you next time.
When life gets ugly, justice is love.